Well, good morning. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You're looking fabulous on this beautiful, sunny Saturday morning. And why do I emphasise the sunny? Because I'm in the UK, and the sun is a little bit like Santa in the fact that you only see him once a year. Anyway, straight into the meat and potatoes. As I touch on one small element of the recent paperwork, everybody's looking at the fact that they're looking at all of the social media history of the victims potentially, and they're trying to say whether Kohberger was indeed. We're back to this stalker. We're going round and round and round in circles. But I want to touch on something, and it's this. I'm only going to show you this bit briefly, just so to put some context behind it. And that is these here. And that is the fact that it would appear that there are multiple phones that they're looking into. So when they approached AT&T, they had two phones and they wanted to get all of the information on these two phones. That was absolutely everything. Now, that was messages coming in, messages going out, everything connected to it. And all of the accounts that were ringing into it and being rung from it, they wanted the information on those as well. And that led me to believe we've, for a long time, considered the why in this case. And there are multiple whys. You know, why, if it's Bryan Kohberger, why did he do it? Why did he just up sticks one night and head over there? And why was it on this specific night? There's lots of whys. The point being, there are lots of whys. And one of my whys is, why would a guy who we're seemingly supposed to believe done this crime completely on his own, it was a solo act, and if we dare say that, you know, someone else was involved, or he didn't do it on his own, or he didn't do it at all, people lose their fucking shit. But if he was working completely on his own, then why would he appear to have at least one burner phone? Potentially two. Now, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, well, no, he was using these to go on Snapchat and Instagram to look at him. I've thought that. I've considered it. But then I'm thinking to myself, so what we're supposed to do is, he was so careful that he wouldn't even look at these girls on Instagram using his own phone, that he went and got himself burners so he could do it. And then, in addition to that, he then drives his own car to commit the crime itself and takes his own phone with him. Do you see what I mean? There's a bit of a conundrum there. Bryan Kohberger is a conundrum, because in order to believe that he was indeed the guy who did this, you have to consider the stupidity and the brilliance of the guy, because they both coexist in this case. Why would a guy have a burner phone? And look, I'm just going by the court documentations that would appear to point in the direction that there is multiple phones. Now, look, they could be old phones. At the end of the day, they could be just old, disused phones. But it would appear that there was obviously activity on them, because law enforcement have gone to AT&T, which was obviously the network that was on those phones, to approach to obtain the information, as aforementioned, everything to do with it, all of the activity. So I ask, why would a guy who's completely working solo potentially have a burner phone? What do you think of when you think of burner phones? Who generally has burner phones, apart from cheats, those secret phones hidden away? And I'm not saying that only cheats have second phones. I know that. But generally, who would you consider would have a second phone? Potentially even a third phone? Now, do you think that it could potentially be someone that is involved in narcotics? And I hear the whispers now as they turn around and say, here we go again. Talking about cartels, and what bloody cartel are you talking about then? I've had all this. I've had these conversations. Oh, you lot saying there's cartels. What cartels are in Moscow, Idaho? What cartels are in Idaho? Mexican drug cartels are in Idaho. And just by doing a simple Google search yourself, you can see that Moscow, Idaho itself has a fentanyl issue, with over 40 cases of fentanyl, I think it was overdosing, in 2022. And what at the moment is the number one narcotic that the Mexican drug cartels are specifically trying to push across the United States, and seemingly concentrated in Idaho? Rainbow fentanyl. So it exists. It does exist. And look, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that the cartel went in there and done a hit. Now, it could have happened. Yes, and again, simple Google searches yourself, looking at drug cartels and the operation and around this area, brings up multiple cases. They even last year got themselves a dog, a canine, I believe it was a Labrador, specifically to assist them in Moscow, Idaho, with an ongoing drug issue. So this area, bearing in mind, and look, it's not just the students, I don't just want to blame them, because there was actually a business owner as well in Moscow, Idaho, who was jailed as part of, I think there was 8 of them in total, part of a ring distribution network. They were imprisoned. So it happens. They're there. Get over it. And I'm just trying to find the why. I'm trying to understand all of the information as it comes out and make sense of it. And when I see things that don't make sense, and there are questions that need to be answered, look, I'm not naive enough to think, look, it don't matter whether I know it or not. I just want to know it because I'm fucking nosy. I like to look into cases and make sure that I feel that justice is being served. So it's something positive. I don't feel that this is yet another person being done over by a government who is propped up on narcotic money. Narcotics is one of the biggest industries, if not the biggest industry on the planet. Multi-billion-dollar industry. Countries have risen and fallen off the back end of narcotics money, and that's a fact. So look, when we talk about could this have potentially been drug involvement, did someone get out of their debt, that is a very, very real possibility. Very, very real possibility. Do I think that Bryan Kohberger worked for a cartel? I don't know whether Bryan worked for a cartel at all, but there was a story, and it was about 2 drug dealers. It was one who worked as a drug dealer, and he got someone who was a bodyguard who would go with him on these when they sell drugs. And I believe that there was a case, there was about $300 worth of fentanyl or something being sold, and it resulted in the bodyguard of this dealer killing someone and then going to prison in this area. So it happens, do you know what I mean? Around Idaho and these places, it happens. And to completely rule out that the why in all of this is not connected to narcotics is very naive. It could just be that people knew that there were narcotics there and they wanted to go in and rob them, and Bryan was part of the people who wanted to rob them. But what I do know is if these, what we're seeing here in this documentation is indeed that Bryan had another phone, possibly multiple phones, he was using them for something. And generally when you have phones, you use them to ring people. Who was he ringing? Why was he ringing? Why weren't he ringing them off his main phone? And again, this is an if, but the documentation that is placed before us seems to tell us that Bryan Kohberger had multiple phones. And all I'm asking is, if that's the case, why do you have them? Was he in a relationship and was he cheating and that was his sexy phone? Or could he have potentially been part of a group of people who were distributing narcotics and that was his burner phone for doing deals? Who knows? You tell me, what do you think? Is this completely unrelated whatsoever? Are these just old phones found sitting in a drawer and he weren't even using them? Could be the case, of course it could. But if that's not the why, if narcotics isn't the why, what is the why? Are you still of a mindset that this guy, Bryan Kohberger, did this because he is an incel? And if that's what you think, please, please, please show me the proof. And when I say proof, I don't mean what Ashley Banfield or Nancy Grace says. I want to know the proof. I want to see in the documentation, the legal documentation that's been released, and everything that has been said proves that that's the case. Proves that he was stalking him, he was an incel, he had issues, he blew his nut, went over there and done this crime for no real apparent reason. And in addition to that, if that's the case, I want to know how he knew that everyone was in there in that house that night, and that the time he went there, he wasn't going to face 20 odd people in that house. Please tell me. Please tell me. And just before we go, look, I'll show you. I've got some in air. I'll swap that screen round. We'll bring this back up. Me here. And I'm going to go to share screen. Let's share this. Look. Idaho law enforcement captures Mexican cartel guns and drugs. 2 Idaho law enforcement agencies used flashbang and tear gas devices in an early dawn raid against alleged members of the Mexican drug cartel on Tuesday morning. SWAT teams from the Canyon County Sheriff's Office and the Caldwell Police Department served a warrant at the Caldwell residence. No one was hurt, serving the high-risk search warrant. So this is just one here. When was this? Does it even say? That was the 31st of August 2022. It says just under there. So look, it does exist. They do have a narcotics problem, a huge narcotics problem. And if the cartels are operating in here, anything's possible. Someone could have got out of their depth. And when you pair that with little conversations like, what did you tell Adam? I told him everything. They're going to get you for this. It kind of makes you go in certain directions. So for all them who criticise people for looking, I've got one thing to say. Fuck you. And I'll see you all in the next one.